Good morning, everyone. Okay, those of you who know me know that I need to start with the audience responding. So good morning, everyone. Thank you. And Nancy, thank you for that introduction. And I'm so appreciative to both Robert and Rhonda for extending an invitation for me to come back to GEOINT. The last time we were together was in June of 2019. And the world has changed so much since then. If you had known what you know now, how might you have spent the last 2 years differently? Thankfully, during the same time, and despite the pandemic, this community has continued to make progress and to evolve. It is wonderful to be able to be here in person with so many friends and from industry, academia, and government, including former colleagues from NGA, particularly Vice Admiral Sharp, who you will hear from later, and to be in St. Louis, a city that is an incredible supporter of the geospatial sciences and geospatial information technology, and home to NGA's current West campuses and NGA's next West campus, which I had to tour yesterday, which is absolutely fantastic. I would like to thank my colleagues also who are here from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, John Beeler, who you heard from yesterday, and Jeanette McMillan. They're participating in this great lineup of speakers that USGIF has assembled for us. As I begin, I would like to reflect on the anniversaries we marked this year. The first to come to mind is a somber one we just commemorated, the 20th anniversary of 9/11, a day that immediately and significantly changed our country and the world. However, there are other anniversaries of importance, particularly to this community. 25 years ago, the National Imagery and Mapping Agency, NEMA, was created. And 60 years ago, NEMA's predecessor, the National Photographic Interpretation Center, or NPIC, was created. It was also 60 years ago that the Defense Intelligence Agency began providing capabilities to America's warfighters, and the National Reconnaissance Office capabilities began to benefit both the warfighter and the intelligence community. Looking forward to 2022, the Defense Mapping Agency, another NEMA predecessor, based here in St. Louis, CIA and NSA will also celebrate milestone birthdays as well. World War II and the Cold War were catalysts for the organization, or reorganization in some cases, of these secret agencies. Their creation illustrates a theme. Much of what we've done in GEOINT in the past has been highly secretive and driven more than anything by responding to crises. Each of these anniversaries also marks the pivotal point where the nation sought to address a national security challenge through the application of technology and innovation. Our predecessors' experiences shaped their future, a future that is now our present. They deliberately took the challenges at hand and the adversity they faced and turned them into strengths. These agencies were created by men whose lived experiences included the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the invasion of Korea, and the Soviet Union's acquisition and testing of nuclear weapons. Each was a surprise for which we had little or no warning, and our nation's leaders wanted to be sure we were not surprised again. NGA was created because we identified significant gaps in imaging and mapping during the first Gulf War, which overlap with a long-standing desire to make GEOINT operations not only more effective, but more responsive and more efficient. The world we live in now, including the consolidation of federal agencies into the Department of Homeland Security, the creation of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, we saw a dramatic demand for industry's capabilities in the aftermath of and in response to 9/11. A problem, a solution, a commitment to improve America's security, and through it all, America's GEOINT community continued to evolve, and its importance has only grown. Those were the challenges then, but the world is doing what it does. It is constantly changing, and the rate of that change is only accelerating. GEOINT is a field where those who are successful embrace change. And although it was the government's needs that led us into the space race, Industry has since taken the baton and is driving proliferation of satellites of every kind. And while government still has its own specific needs, commercial industry year over year is playing a bigger role in providing the information that the government previously provided for itself with the assistance of industry partners who helped us build our own capabilities. In some ways, I'm sure it seems like we in government are still getting used to this new reality. And frankly, as many of you know well, we have not always been the easiest customer. We want to be a better customer, not simply a purchaser of your products or a regulatory barrier to your success. We want and we need the American GEOINT industry to be the strongest and most capable on earth. A strong economic sector is vital to supporting our defense industrial base and our nation. This is an evolving relationship. Those of you who attended the previous session caught a glimpse of this changing dynamic in the innovative tradecraft competition. There, private companies applied machine learning, data science, and gaming technology to help predict a national crisis, not unlike the ones that spurred the creation of NRO, NGA, and ODNI. This is the world we are in, and this conference is a point of departure, much like St. Louis was for pioneers going west. USGIF continues its important role as a convener. It is where we come together to find solutions and make the GEOINT community stronger by pushing technology, accelerating innovation, and advancing tradecraft. The question before us now is, how do we do this in a time when the world has been stunned by the COVID-19 pandemic, as we are increasingly tasked to anticipate and overcome threats from state and non-state actors, and in an age of strategic competition where rivals challenge us militarily and economically in domains both old and new? It will be up to us, and it will require the GEOINT community and the IC in partnership to be resilient and to adapt, and we will do so together. The next frontier is space. Some might call it the final frontier. Thank you to those of you who recognize the reflection there. Space is an example of where commercial competition has extended into places where government used to be the only operator. Once we entered the space race, this collaboration between government and industry kept us ahead of our adversaries. Government was the customer, and the relationship served us well. However, this model is no longer sufficient to guarantee future leadership in space. It must, and it is, being rethought. The stakes, especially for those in this room, but really for the nation, are high. At the formation of NRO and NPIC, access to space and to GEOINT in general was primarily for the use of and structured by government. By the time NEMA was stood up, before it became NGA, that paradigm had begun to change, with commercial imagery in its nascent stages and few foreign competitors. Contrast that with today, when so much of the investment in GEOINT satellites is from the private sector, and there is an array of foreign commercial competitors. Today, we are balancing buying GEOINT capabilities from commercial companies and building custom satellites. It is now a matter of policy to consider commercial imagery first. This trajectory is set to accelerate. For example, since the beginning of the year, NGA has signed 3 new private sector service contracts, and NRO is also planning for future commercial capabilities. While the benefits of government collaboration remain significant, so have the burdens and restrictions imposed by government. We have gone from a time when government was the biggest consumer to an age of competition. Government must continue to pivot to allow this important industry to flourish and to remain your biggest supporter, though not necessarily your biggest funder. For example, as you are well aware, American companies have been constrained by a commercial licensing process that for many has been slow and opaque and felt burdensome. We want America, especially American companies, to lead. We in government know the partnership with industry is critical to maintaining our edge, and that commercial applications are not just a sideline, but a main source of revenue for industry. That means we need to put in place a strategy so our private sector partners can remain innovative, responsive, and strong. To do that, Odie and I brought together all the different IC space interests so our community could speak with one voice to engage the Departments of Defense, State, Interior, and Commerce. We want to develop effective and coordinated policy that will increase economic opportunities for the commercial remote sensing community. In less than 3 years, these departments working with the IC were able to reduce the time it takes to review new licensing requests to half. This success ultimately led to the creation of what we now know as the Intelligence Community Commercial Space Council, created in October 2020 during the pandemic, to help DoD and commercial and civil space agencies develop effective and coordinated policy. In the IC, we want to understand and adapt to the rapidly evolving commercial mindset, including providing greater clarity to the licensing process, particularly around national security concerns. And we've had tremendous success. More and more for both large established industry partners and smaller vendors, the answer we have been given licensing requests from industry is yes. But this is not the end of the story. In fact, we believe that this is just the beginning of a new exciting chapter in our relationship. We are increasingly integrating industry voices into our deliberations to better understand and address the needs of America's commercial partners. We understand that foreign competitors are numerous and growing. This includes growth among our allies and friends, but also growth in those countries where public and private, and especially civilian and military, are more blurred or non-existent. In our analysis, some of these companies are closing the gap, creating security concerns, and winning private sector business that could be yours. We want to pare down the constraints you face to only those that are absolutely necessary, particularly when it comes to competing on capabilities that are commercially available from others. While lifting some restrictions will not be possible, because custom and classified GEOINT capabilities are still critical to helping us understand and confront core national security challenges, it should be possible to provide a unified, clear response that will allow you to make the investments you need and want to make more quickly. Broadly speaking, there are models out there for us to look to as to where we want to go. One close to the hearts of many in this space is the launch industry. Prior to the last decade, only large governments with sophisticated space programs had launch capabilities. With the retirement of the space shuttle, there was a critical need to fill seams in launch, and the space sector was actively encouraged by NASA and others to develop alternatives. What have been the results so far? The cost per kilo to send materials into low Earth orbit has dropped significantly. A robust competitive market has developed, resulting in a flurry of innovation. And while government remains a significant customer, reliable, low-cost launch has been at the foundation of so many other uses, including broadening the aperture for a variety of GEOINT services. NASA did an amazing job of recognizing the changing landscape for launch. Their approach allowed the private sector to provide a needed service for government that was cost-effective. A key question remains, though. Is this a model that could work elsewhere, such as for imaging services and analytics, for example? In all of this, it is important to realize and recognize that there is a growing consensus, not only in the IC, but also among policymakers, that the kinds of change that we've seen in launch services is the right way to go in other areas. And this is because there is a recognition that the competitive environment is rapidly changing. And in this new environment, American industry must continue to lead. That if we don't adapt, others will set the rules and challenge our leadership. We should set the rules. We should influence the standards, and do so in a way that is consistent with our democratic values. And we also believe that a fully engaged private sector is necessary to keep America competitive, in an area that is increasingly important commercially and yet remains vital to our nation's security. The best and most sustainable policies are those for which there is a national consensus and that receive support across parties and administrations. And this is now one of them. But whether we're operating with you in space or on Earth, I found that one key to the success of long-standing private sector government partnerships, specifically within the IC, and particularly those that provide technical services and products, is understanding our need for security and resiliency. We must know that our partners take this issue as seriously as we do. During both wartime and peacetime, we deliver intelligence to our customers in conditions that are often far from perfect. We may be forced to operate with limited information, limited bandwidth, or in a degraded environment. Many times, lives hang in the balance, and failure is not an option. The ability to be secure, resilient, and recover quickly is critical not just on the battlefield, but in outer space, in cyberspace, in maritime environments, and in so many other domains where we operate. This is increasingly true as systems are more and more integrated, and as we get closer and closer to real-time engagement between sensor and operator. Those who are successful partners with us understand how critical security and resiliency are in the systems on which we rely. You know, part of what makes the GEOINT community so powerful is that it looks at the world as it was, as it is, and as it can be. The future is not set in stone. We can influence it, change it, and strive to make it better. When Corona was the height of available technology, its images would sometimes take weeks to get to customers, whether that was a general on the battlefield or policymakers in the White House. The goal now is to get data from sensor to system or sensor to decision maker in timelines that were previously unimaginable. And not achieving that goal is unthinkable now. As I conclude my remarks, I have a question for you. Are we safer now than we were during the Cold War? Are we safer now than we were in that September morning 20 years ago when our nation was attacked? If we are, it is because we as a community made it so. The question before us now is, what are the strategies, capabilities, and partnerships we will need to be safer and resilient and even better prepared 20 years from now? That will be up to us. Now, to paraphrase the call to action from a top secret high-tech government project from long ago, we can rebuild it. We have the technology. We can make it better than it was. Better, stronger, and faster. That is what we want for GEOINT, and that is what we need from you. Let's do this together. Thank you.
Awesome. Stacey, Dr. Dixon, Madam Principal Deputy. It's so wonderful to see you here on this stage and to be with you again and to hear your encouraging and challenging words for our community. As was mentioned in the introduction, we're so privileged to have Stacey in this important position, not just because who you are, but where you've been, to include at some of our leading academic institutions in our country and pursuing your undergrad at Stanford and your advanced degrees at Georgia Tech. Well, Stacey, in this audience, we've got really the leading lights of our industry, pushing the boundaries of our capabilities, and you highlighted some of those historic successes. But my questions, I'm going to turn around a little bit. You're now in our nation's second highest ranking position in our community, and all of those are coming to your desk, no pressure. But what isn't coming to your desk? What is it that you need this team, this industry, these partnerships to be working more on? What is it that you'd like to be getting tomorrow that you're not getting today?
Thanks, Robert. It's very good to see you again. A little bit of this I touched on in the remarks, but it isn't so much a particular capability that hasn't come to the desk that I want to see. What it is that I want to see are those tried and tested things that you can offer to our community. You have brilliant ideas, you develop them into algorithms or systems or platforms that we can buy. The thing that I learned when I was at IARPA a few years ago, and the thing that comes with me to this day, is those capabilities, those technologies, those algorithms are only as good as we've proven them to be through rigorous testing and evaluation, independent testing and evaluation. So what I want to see are things coming to me with more than sort of anecdotal stories of why it's going to make us better, why this particular algorithm is going to help predict something else. I want to see the rigor and the testing behind it, and I also want to see that security built in. I think we see in the headlines every day that someone else is being hacked. Some other bit of intellectual property is being stolen. We need you all to really double down in terms of the investments that you're making to protect your companies, protect your IP, protect the capabilities that we're then going to rely on you for. We want to be able to use the capabilities that you're providing a lot more, but we have to have the confidence in the security of the data that's being delivered. And only you can really do that investment for yourselves. We will try to take care of protecting that information once we have it, but because we want to be able to rely on so much of what you're providing, we have to know that you all are taking that seriously. So how you're investing in cybersecurity, how you're investing in your own insider threat analysis, how you're investing in protecting your networks is critically important. So those are the things that I want to see, in addition to the amazing innovative capabilities that I know are being created and developed.
That's great to hear. I think at a podium like this, I may have talked about that competition that you reflected too, that frankly, because of this industry and because of the innovators that you recognized in your remarks, for a long time our country had a unique advantage. We had tech, we had capabilities in one house, and we're in a competition. And I think I said something like, the easiest way to lose a race is not know you're in it. So we're in it. So thank you, Stacey, for reinforcing that point with respect to the resilience component. My next question has the risk of asking you to solve world hunger, so I apologize. But it's the acquisition process, right? Which I realize any one of us can now share, good and bad stories about. But I guess personalizing, Stacey, when I left government some 3 years ago, I had a view of that process. Now I have another view because I see it from the other side. Where can OD&I be as a help to, again, not solve everything because this involves our legislative branch and federal regulations, et cetera, but what's the OD&I doing to perhaps at least remove some of the barriers, mitigate some of the challenges to some of these new companies that are with us here at the symposium to join the team through what can be a daunting process?
There are both authorities as well as approaches to acquisition that exist today that many agencies have not embraced and have not really spent a lot of time trying out. There are traditional and standard ways to approach acquisition, and we're very good at those, as cumbersome as they are. But there are other rules and regulations out there that we actually can leverage more fully. And so I'm excited to see not only OD&I talking about that within the acquisition communities, but other agencies are also trying to find ways to not only partner better, to expose their needs to industry, but also to be able to interact with and meet more of the new companies out there that would seek to work with government. So part of it is just making sure that we're using all the tools at our disposal, and we do have some work to do on that because we haven't necessarily had the large cadres of acquisition professionals using these tools before. And so the first time you try some of these things, it can be difficult. But we are committed to try to figure out how we can do things more quickly, more effectively and efficiently. We realize that the bureaucratic burden is high, especially for those of you who have never worked with us before. We don't want to scare you away. But even those of you who have been coming back and figured out how to work through the system, we are trying to figure out if there are other ways that the system can be less cumbersome so that we can move more quickly where we need to move more quickly, but still have the protections and the fairness in place that we know are important across the community.
Thank you, Stacey. Okay, fair warning. The next question has to deal with the budget. So you're welcome to pivot any way you want, but I'm going to ask it as directly as I can. You mentioned analytics, right? We all appreciate, again, In an earlier era, we had such great advantage in the input side. We could image, we could sense, we could get to space better, faster than anyone else could. Much of that has been commoditized and democratized, and now there's a race at the other end, right, on the analytics end. So, and by the way, I'm going to accept some of the reality of our current budget, because I owned it for a while. But we're not seeing the kind of investment. I'm not seeing the kind of investment on that end of the equation. I appreciate the programs you highlighted in your remarks, but could we expect, one, some growth, but two, maybe a more holistic program or effort that energizes and infuses the kind of fuel to create the feedback from industry, academia, et cetera? So will the budget get bigger, Stacey?
Oh, I wish I could say yes to that one. I guess I'll answer it this way. The budget can be shaped to be used differently. How about that?
Okay.
I wish I could say the budget would get bigger. That would be great for a lot of us. But in terms of being able to spend more money on the services and the analytics, we do need to figure out what that right balance is of just sort of buying the pictures, buying the images, and then buying those services and analytics. Part of the demand signal, though, I think, is there are a lot more companies out right now selling us images and selling us the capabilities, the platforms, access to those things. The market will follow when there are many offerings, and I realize that there are some of you out there that are providing services now and want to sell more. I think as our demand signal increases, and it is increasing, we definitely want to buy more, but they've got to be things that make sense, and again, things that are tested well. I think we will see a rebalancing of the two. I don't know exactly which way it'll go and how quickly we'll get there, but as we have more services and analytics that are proven that we can buy, we will buy more. So continue to develop them, continue to develop different things than your colleagues in other companies may be developing, so that we're not having to choose between the best one of the thing that does the same thing. Bring a different capability to us, and we will definitely consider it. We've got people out there hungry to be able to share the mission that we have and figure out how industry can help us so that we can focus on some other things where industry has a great ability to do certain things for us.
Great. I'm going to follow up on that one and talk about the broad topic of public-private partnerships. Something I've tried to do, had some success there. You've done those through CRADA experiences, et cetera. I'll just tell you my bias and ask for your reaction. My bias is that we've got to get better at it, we, federal government, and better by both providing the demand signal, what is it we need, but then an avenue for responsiveness that doesn't always mean, contract A, B, or C, because, well, I always knew, but now I've seen more clearly on the other side, sometimes industry just isn't clear on that need, and getting to have those tough conversations with the analysts or the source managers or the foundation producers about what the real problems are. So what's OD&I's take on either providing more guidance or perhaps more permissions to allow those kind of partnerships to exist?
Actually, thank you for that one. And yesterday, for those of you who were able to hear John Beeler speak, he did reference sort of an ICS&T framework and a needs document that is literally sitting on my desk at home. So when I get back there, I will be able to finish that one up. But much like the previous iteration of it, it does help put in, at various classification levels, descriptions of what our needs are. And so hopefully industry will find, and academia, will find that useful in understanding where we're trying to go with some of the things we would like to buy from industry and work with industry. I think the partnerships, we're going to have to figure those out. Like there's a lot of both civil liberty, privacy, transparency concerns we've got to think about. There are concerns in terms of the IP and where those things are and who owns those. But the data that government has, the data that industry has, right now we've been in our different silos, as everyone knows, and we see that that's not the way it is for countries that would be our competitors. In many places, all of that data is available for everyone to use, and not that we want to get there the same way that they do, sort of the, not always volunteer collaboration, I'll say. We would like to be able to have companies that want to work with us and that continue to do so, but we do need to figure out those very sticky processes that make everyone a little less unhappy and uncomfortable, but that still work and allow the sharing that we know is going to be required.
Next question is just inquiring minds category, which means you sit at the nation's second highest seat in the intelligence community. And I know you've only been there a relatively short period of time, but I'd like to know, and I'm going to now assume the audience would like to know, how is the relationship going, okay, with that broad customer base? And again, not politicizing anything, just trying to make a comment about how's the demand signal, how's the response going. We're certainly, well, I'll say, we're seeing with this administration some more public tasking is coming to the D&I on some issues that were not maybe categorized as traditional. Just, I guess, what's your sense as you step into the job about how that relationship is going today?
Relationship is great. So I don't have a lot of personal experiences with previous administrations, any of them. This is the first time that I've really been seeing as much of the policy side of things, but I've been very, very encouraged by the interactions that I see between OD&I and really others in the IC and the administration. You've seen many of the executive orders coming out which provide tasking to us and others. So there's a demand signal for a lot of engagement and a lot of efforts in a variety of things, whether it's diversity and inclusion, whether it is cybersecurity, whether it is in the competition space. I think that's a good sign and signal for all of us that we need to be figuring out how to work together well, to employ and engage as many aspects and elements of the community, of this entire country as we can in the work that we do. The variety of topics is pretty amazing. There's just, I mean, you see it in the news. There's so many things happening in the world, and this administration is definitely very engaged in trying to make sure that we have a good policy perspective. And the intelligence that the community derives from both commercial and classified systems is helping to inform that. There's a lot of appetite for more information, more intelligence, and it's been a very good, 60 days so far, 60-something days, but it's been a very good my ability to understand and see that relationship and how positive it is has been very, very positive.
So I'm sorting now.
Nope.
We have categories of questions, and so I've got a number in that would just ask you to follow up. You mentioned the issue of security and resiliency, yes, and ask of industry to ensure they're doing their part as they bring data and solutions to you. But can you talk a little bit more about the broader approach that, one, we want and need to engage in open data, unclassified sources, and yet we need to do it with a way of sense of credibility and assuredability and is there any malign influence going on there? At NGA, we stood up the Office of GEOINT Assurance to focus on that. I guess I'm unaware, what's OD&I's view? I mean, obviously your view is it's important, but is there anything that you're doing organizationally or via policy to infuse that in the community or to encourage and enforce that intent?
I would say in those conversations where either it's the CIOs are coming together or even in some of the other dialogues that they were having at both the executives level as well as the deputies level across the community, we were certainly talking about the need to make sure that our information and data is secure and safe, that we know where it's coming from, that we have the ability to ensure that we are providing to our customers something that we have confidence in, that has not been tampered with or manipulated or influenced in any way, making sure that we are providing the information as we see it, keeping political politics and other things out of that as we do our analysis. So I guess those are two sides of that question. But the community is talking about it. There isn't quite a name like GEOINT Assurance that I've seen across the entire communities, but each different discipline, each intelligence discipline has its own insurance or assurance mechanisms that it is putting into place. We are, I guess, providing best practices and an opportunity in a forum where people can talk about what they're doing and hopefully inspire others to continue to add on to the capabilities and to add on to the approaches that they're using to keep their information secure.
Thanks. I've got a number of questions that are basically people-based.
Okay.
And Stacey, you may well be uniquely qualified to answer this question because some of them touch on culture and on inclusion and different points of view, et cetera. There is no right answer to this, but I mean, how do we ensure that we're getting the right voices to the table, that we're writing the contrarian views when we need? I mean, these are tradecraft issues we've struggled with forever. But today, as you said, when we're getting demand signal that is giving us questions that perhaps we haven't dealt with before, how does the OD&I think about making sure that the right people are getting to the table?
It's interesting. One of the approaches is ensuring that we're creating an environment where dissent or disagreements are okay. There have been times when we have tried to come to consensus, at the expense of having different opinions at the table. But we talk about that a lot when we talk about the culture of the intelligence community and the culture of the analytic community in particular. It's still a work in progress. We are not perfect, but we want it to be an organization and a place where people actually can bring those dissents, talk about them fully. You still may not end up with a consensus. There still may be some people who have different opinions, but you've allowed those to be able to be reflected in your analytical products and discussed and debated openly and without fear of anything negative happening to someone's career. So a bit of it is making sure that the culture is aware that we want what the intelligence shows us. We don't want a particular outcome. We don't want a particular we don't need a particular conclusion to be drawn. We just want the information to take us where it needs to go. And if that conclusion changes over time because different information is coming in, that is okay too. We just have to be able to explain it to our policymakers who may not have all the information. They may not understand how many different sources of information are coming through. So a bit of it is just making sure from the highest levels that we're communicating that down, and that's making it down to those that are actually writing the analysis. We like dissent. We like people to bring in new ideas. Part of that is also making sure that we have a community that recruits from as many different parts of the country and as many different types of people as possible. More and more as we're focused overseas and the challenges and the threats increase, having that cultural awareness of different places really is a benefit. We can do and we can learn a lot through study, but if you can also bring in individuals who have lived it, who've grown up in certain ways of thinking, it's only going to make our community better. So it's twofold. Making sure the people in the community know that we want them to be bringing in all sorts of ideas and debating the issues, and then making sure that we are inviting to the table as much of a diverse population as we can, because America is very diverse, the world is certainly diverse, and we want to make sure all the talent that wants to come in and contribute has an opportunity to do so.
So my follow-up to that is really, how are we doing? And I'll just, pay tribute. One of your programs as deputy director of NGA that you were championing was what I'd call that neurodiversity approach. So, how are we doing, Stacey?
I think we have a number of, and the neurodiversity pilot was wonderful. It was a pilot. It was successful. It only involved a couple of individuals being able to bring in people from the neurodiversity spectrum. There's a realization around the community that there are many jobs that we have that people have been excluded from in the past. That doesn't make any sense. People have talents. We need to be able to find a way to bring those in. Some of the other things that we're doing, reaching out to different universities that we've recruited from before, making sure that our agencies, our systems are useful and usable by people of differing abilities, making sure for our deaf and hard of hearing colleagues that we have the technology in place to be able to assist them in helping us do the mission. So there's a realization now that there are investments that we can make that are not that expensive, that can make it easier for people to contribute all that they can. Some of those are pilots, and we have to get beyond the pilot stage, but we are definitely moving in that direction, and many agencies are starting to have their own initiatives. I think sort of, again, bringing people together at the OD&I to share the best practices around the community so that the community partners can build on and not have to start from scratch is what we can do as a community.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go back to the more fun questions of, budgets and ownership and lanes. I've got a number of questions that revolve around the advent of the Space Force. And new player, old capability, but a new organization, rumors about budget realignment and authorities and who's going to get what, and the end of this is going to be how are we doing. But I can imagine there's many discussions about, who has which lane and how do we, move requirements and improve, budgetary decisions, et cetera. But can you give us some insight to how the relationship is going between OD&I, NRO, NGA, and Space Force?
It's been actually very, very positive. Not that shouldn't be surprising. There are so many different things that we need to be doing as we do more in space that I think the realization is there that the way we were doing it before was not sufficiently resourced. Frankly, there are other challenges and threats that we need to be focused on that while we had some focus, now we can have a more concerted, a more mature approach to some of these topics. So the conversations between the agencies have been great. I think there's been a learning process for those who are now in Space Force to see their touch points in the different agencies in the government who have a role in this. And these individuals are continuing to partner. So I only see those partnerships continuing to grow, especially as the agencies themselves, the intelligence agencies, try to figure out how they can best position providing information from their own intelligence discipline to assist in what the Space Force needs to do. So net positive. I guess we're going on a year anniversary in a couple months for them, and I for one, have enjoyed interacting with the Space Force, and I only see, again, the relationship continuing to mature. Yes, there are decisions to be made in terms of resources, and those will be challenging as they always are, but the net positive is having more individuals, more talented individuals focused on space, which is consuming so much more of our time and effort and energy, as it should be, because of the central role that it plays, not only in security, but in information sharing, in all the things that we do in this world. Space, it's time for space to get its due, and I guess that is what's happening now with the creation of the Space Force.
Great. Another lane question. We just, during our tradecraft competition, we had one of the presenters was talking about COVID and anticipating where the next outbreak would be, which we'd all agree as a society and a community is important to do. But the question is intelligence. Is that an intelligence community issue?
That's a really good question. Certainly the intelligence community is being asked the question, what we knew, what we could have found out, could we have done things differently so that we would have had more awareness? I think ultimately that will be the question that has to be answered sort of writ large across government. There are many different other agencies outside the intelligence community which also collect information that would be useful in predicting future pandemics. Understanding what our role is something that we're going to have to figure out. I don't actually have an answer to that question because it's one that we're kind of rolling around. There are things that the intelligence community can do, but should the intelligence community do those things? So that is the current debate. There's certainly information that we gather that will be useful in informing and keeping an eye on and being able to see when trends are disrupted, that something is going on. But it really will take more than just the intelligence community, and ultimately may not land there as a primary responsibility, but we certainly should be and can contribute to it. So I think time will tell is probably the best answer for that one.
Thank you, thank you. Stacey, as we wrap up, and thank you again for taking the time with us here today. Real estate, truism, location, location, location. I would offer intelligence. It's talent, talent, talent. We have our YPG Golden Ticket winners here today. We had our tradecraft competitors here. The audience has got interns and students and young professionals and mid-career and experienced professionals. And so I guess, what would you impart to that audience, that part of our audience with respect to joining our community and perhaps giving them a sense of your vision of the future and why this is a profession worth considering and joining?
I would say don't hesitate at all. If you have at all an interest in anything that you've seen during the course of this conference, give it a try. The nice thing about being able to be in the intelligence community, it isn't monolithic. It's not one thing. You can come in as one particular discipline, one particular expertise, and you can pick up so many along the way. The benefit of something like GEOINT, though, or geospatial intelligence and geospatial information systems, is it touches every single intelligence discipline and can really help make those disciplines even more effective and stronger than they are. So even if you come in as a GEOINT professional, you can touch a lot of different areas that you would be interested in. Being in public service is something I wish more people would consider, or supporting national security. So you don't always have to just be in government to be supporting national security, but I want more people to be willing to do one or the other or both. Because I think it is such a motivating thing to be able to know that the things that you do on a day-to-day basis are helping to keep the country safe, while still allowing you to interact with the great technology, the great capabilities that this country can create. So don't hesitate. Come in for a little while. If it's not for you, you will have benefited from having been in the community. But my guess is once we get you in, you will see some things within the community that may grab a hold of you, as it has many who've come before you, and make you want to be a GEOINTer all your life. It's certainly a worthwhile place to be, and you'd be welcome in our family.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for your service. We're rooting for you, Stacey. We're all behind you. Please, would you return to Liberty Crossing, pass on our warm regards to all of our friends. Please join me in thanking Dr. Stacey Dixon.
Thank you.